Spotlight Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ham, coming to you as always from the Spotlight Studios here in Morristown, New Jersey. This is our last episode of the day of the larger PodMax event. So this is going to be my third installment of a 3-episode series from this event here on Friday, February 26th. My guest today is the CEO of ajbishop.co, CEO, and founder of My Wealth Conscious Coach. She spent over 15 years in the wealth management industry, holding senior level positions such as managing director and senior VP at major industry players. She's a self-made millionaire who comes from humble beginnings. She's a true powerhouse, and personal transformation is kind of her thing. She's a source of inspiration for ambitious and driven women in male-dominated workplaces, and her authenticity and candor have earned her the title of being called the modern-day Suze Orman meets Oprah. She is AJ Bishop. AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited. I mean, as I was mentioning to you before, I mean, both of my guests so far at the PodMax event have absolutely crushed it. And those episodes will have already posted and people will have already listened to them. So not that you have a big shoes to fill, but I am totally confident after reading through some of your stuff and listening to some of your stuff and like looking through the website and everything, you're going to crush it. I have no doubts about that. So there's 3 words that I found on your website that were kind of highlighted. It says also goes by CEO, Trailblazer, Powerhouse, right? So I want to see if we can kind of like almost break up the episodes into 3 different sections and talk about like why each of those defines who you are. This is the first time I've ever really had like a structure to an episode. And I'm sure within the first 5 minutes, I'm going to like lose that structure because that's just kind of like the way my brain operates. But let's start with CEO. Like talk to us about how your professional background, and then we'll get into all the other stuff.
Well, thanks for such a raving introduction. And I'm so grateful that you have me featured today. So when I think about, my history, CEO was a title I would always say I wanted to have, but just couldn't get, candidly. I grew up in the investment industry, which is male dominated. I was always that young whippersnapper who was bouncing around, full of energy, always like willing to take on things. And even though I had great performance in those corporations, I just wasn't quite sure I could see myself all the way at the top. And so when I made the decision to go out on my own and become an entrepreneur, I felt like, well, I've got the skills of doing it all within an organization. Won't that translate into entrepreneurship? And of course it didn't, because when you work for a company or a corporation, for example, you're operating under the brand, right? So Wells Fargo, JPMorgan, all great companies that I worked for. And now after 15 years, I left and saw, oh, wait a minute, no one knows who the hell AJ Bishop is. And so it was a transition to be able to redefine myself and recreate exactly who I wanted AJ Bishop to be. And that's really what's been the fun part of it.
Right. Yeah. So what were some of those things that you were doing you mentioned some of them, Wells Fargo, et cetera, major industry players. So what were some of like the roles that you had at those companies?
Well, I started out when I was 23 years old as we were called licensed team leads. So I was basically giving investment advice to individuals 2 to 3 times my age. And, everyone used to say, well, how did you do that? Right? Like you were in your early 20s, you're advising 60 and 70-year-olds. And I said, it really was just about being able to connect with people. And so because I had success as a financial advisor, they promoted me into what's called an investment manager, where I led a team of over 30 people. And then from there, I just kept growing until at the very end, I was a managing director, executive vice president at MUFG Union Bank. And I had such a great career, right? I started out in a small town in northern Arizona, and then I was moved out to Seattle. I used to run Silicon Valley as well as Beverly Hills. And then ultimately, I got the opportunity to move to San Diego, where I still live. And the last job I had, they offered to relocate me to Arizona. And I'm sorry if anyone lives there, but I said, you know what, that's where my journey started. So I'm totally good staying in San Diego.
Yeah, honestly, I would stay in San Diego. I was there for the first time ever a couple of years ago. And like, it was ridiculous. Like it was so nice. And I remember, just a quick sidebar story. Again, I told you we're going to get off topic, but I live in Jersey. I went in October for like a commercial real estate conference at the Marriott, I think it was. And left Jersey. It was like October 20th or whatever it was. It was like 48 and raining and sleeting and just disgusting here. And then I landed in San Diego and it's like 80 degrees. And the Uber driver that was taking me from the airport to the hotel was like, "I'm really sorry for this heat wave." And I was like, "What are you joking? Like, is that a joke? I mean, I'm coming from Jersey. Like, this isn't a heat wave. This is amazing." So, yeah, I think you probably made the right choice staying in San.
Yeah, I can't complain. It's currently 68 degrees today.
Yeah, we actually, I mean, we got some nice weather here in Jersey today. I mean, it's February 26th. It's probably like 50 degrees out, which, it kind of like fluctuates quite a bit here in the month of February. But anyway, let's get back. Let's get this train back on the tracks. So as you're kind of making this progression, because one of the things that like I find interesting working for a big corporation, and maybe this can kind of touch into some of the like the either the Trailblazer or the Powerhouse side of it. But you mentioned that you're working for a larger corporation, but still seeking to kind of build your own brand. But I would think that within that company, you are building a brand or at least a reputation, right? So people reckon, I mean, if you're climbing the ladder that as quickly as I feel like you did, I mean, you must know what you're doing. They must recognize that, right?
Oh, absolutely. But it's completely different in the sense that, right, I was relying on the reputation of the company to build my identity versus being out on my own now. It's all right. I always say if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And so, right, I started my career, I was almost 10 years at JPMorgan Chase. And because I had moved all over the country, right, you build a brand. Like you said, your personal identity is a brand or your name is a brand. And then I moved over to Wells Fargo. And I remember when I moved, I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to be able to rebuild what I had at Chase. And to my surprise, I was able to go ahead and just be me, right? Like I just showed up as myself. And because again, I'm not the average, what we call a brokerage manager, which the current age is probably 50s or 60s and male. So I think the good news is because I am different and unique, it was easy to build a brand.
Right. So you start building the brand when you leave, or was it kind of towards the end? That's what you said, right? Towards the end of being in those larger corporations, when you actually started building a brand, what were some ways that you started to do that?
I think the key thing for me was just I already had the skill, and I would say to anyone else, you already have the skills necessary to network and to work with others, but collaboration is one of my core values. And so ensuring that I reached out to people that were actually already doing what I wanted to be doing in the world and asking them, how did you build it? Because I'm a strong believer of I don't want to recreate the well. Like I don't have time. Wherever I'm going, I want to go there fast. And so I would started to connect with other women who were doing exactly what I was doing, which some people would say is counterproductive, but I always found that extremely effective for me in the corporate industry as well. Even though we were competitors in a way, right? There were other managers who my results were measured up to theirs. I just have always found that when you find others and you join, you create a little tribe for yourself. That's the easiest way to continue to build your brand.
Right. Okay. So then at some point you decide that you're going to go out and you're going to do your own thing. And obviously that probably came on the heels of you building that personal brand and wanting to really capitalize on that. But was it just, trying to get out on your own and do your own thing and not be beholden to the corporations? And like, what was kind of like the driving force behind that? And then let's just talk about, what you're doing. And so we can actually kind of like get that on the table too.
Sure. Yeah, I think the turning point for me, honestly, was COVID and realizing that, when we're all at home, watching Netflix or doing whatever we did those first couple of months in quarantine, I had the time to really get introspective and realize, am I making the impact I want in the world? Or am I on too many conference calls and, just in meetings that really don't matter? And so I decided that it was time, even though I didn't think it was time, I still took the leap and decided that it was, I needed to be able to get out into the world to tell the message that I was really meant to tell because it had gone so far in corporate America. And I knew there was just a much broader audience that I could get access to if I became my own show.
Right. What was the show? Like the wealth conscious, to talk to us about that.
Yeah, so my Wealth Conscious Coach exists to empower women with the financial tools they need to uplevel the world. So transformation is really a word that I love and thrive on. And ultimately, we work with all women of all walks of life to ensure that they have the confidence and the clarity that they need to be successful. Because ultimately, wealth is worth, right? And because none of us are taught how to deal with money, or none of us are really taught in even college, right? How to create wealth. It's something that people either were or were not taught. And so I work with a lot of very ambitious and driven women who have made a lot of money, but they don't necessarily feel like they have a good relationship with it.
Right.
So we work in small communities and cohorts because I believe the power of transformation occurs when you can actually see yourself in others. And so most of our cohorts have anywhere from 8 to 30 women all at once. And some people would say, why in the hell do you want to talk about your money issues in front of people? But it's actually really healing at the end of the day.
Right.
And that's where the transformation comes in, because the more we can talk about, right, what is keeping us back from being successful, then the better off we are.
At any point in this, your path through corporate America and then kind of doing your own thing, were there like mentors along the way that you were able to kind of cling to and learn from? Or is it something that has kind of been like a self-starter type thing?
Yeah, so that's where the Trailblazer comes in. This is
See, this is
something,
what I'm doing
yeah,
here. We're moving into Trailblazer.
this is something that I candidly had no clue I would be doing. If you would have asked me prior to COVID, I would have said, "Oh, I'm going to open a yoga studio and partially retire." But I knew that I had the skills that a lot of people needed, and I thought, why would I waste these past 16 years on just, drinking Mai Tais by the beach or whatever, whatever I had envisioned for retirement. And so I was able to really take my love of yoga, my passion for yoga, which ultimately is increasing your awareness about the stuff that, right, gets in your way, as well as taking wealth management. So wealth consciousness ultimately is increasing your awareness about habits and beliefs that don't serve you. And so I took the wealth management, which is more of the practical side, with this idea of wealth consciousness and spirituality, and my wealth conscious coach was created.
Awesome. All right. So now we're getting into the Trailblazer side of it. And like before we really kind of dive into like the whole background and kind of what I'm looking at your site and everything. So I hear like the yoga stuff. I see the Buddha in the background. That's a Buddha, right?
Sure is.
And then like the dream catchers. So is that something that like is I've always interested to kind of see like how people connect like their personal side with like their business side, because that's something that, for a long time I like struggled to try to figure out like how do I take, this is like, regular Mike with the title insurance sales rep Mike, so like, and there was like always like this really weird balance. And I basically felt like I was being two people at one time, but you're able to connect those, right?
Well, Mike, no, we were exactly the same person for a long time. I had a really tough time, right? Who is AJ, the businesswoman, and who is AJ, the yogi who, right, has tattoos and enjoys like, chanting and going to sound baths. I had a really tough time resolving the two. And it wasn't until I finally decided, right, they aren't separate. I am the one person, I am integrated, that my success in corporate America actually really took off. Because for a long time, I was trying to be a man, right? Like ultimately, I was trying to lead my team the same way that the men were leading their teams, because that's the only model that I had. There were very few women in the industry, especially at my level when I started. And so I had to model the men around me, and it just didn't work because ultimately that's not my style. And so when I finally made that choice to just come to work full and complete and whole is when I really started to take off with my company and with my success. And so I would say that, the biggest piece for me was resolving, right? Like, how do I show up at work still powerfully, right? Because obviously in corporate America, there's all these expectation of results, which the results came when I was just able to be me, right? It was sounds so simple, but it was profound that the day I decided I'm going to just show up exactly as I am was the day that my entire career changed.
Right. Was there like a moment? Because like I mean, just because we're on this topic and you know, we kind of have some parallels there. Like I call them like my coming to Jesus's moments or coming to Jesus moments. And like I don't consider myself a religious person. It's just like the phrase that I use just because, you know, was there like a moment where you're just like, you know what, this sucks. Like I'm not like I can't juggle two different people. Like for me, it was like I felt like I was juggling business Mike, personal Mike, dating Mike, this other kind of Mike. And like I mentioned it on an earlier episode, like you could probably feel the starting five for the Knicks with the amount of personalities that I was trying to juggle at one time. So did you have, maybe it was one, maybe it was multiple, but was there like the coming to Jesus moment for you?
I would say the one moment that really sticks out that now that you've brought it out, was right before I transitioned from Chase to Wells. And candidly, that was a big reason why I had built this persona, this intense businesswoman at JPMorgan Chase, and I was burnt out with her. Like, I didn't like who she was. I didn't like the way she spoke. I didn't like the way she interacted with others. And so when I got recruited to go to Wells Fargo, I remember thinking, this is actually my opportunity to do everything differently.
Yeah.
And I would say that exact moment happened when I decided to start my wealth conscious coach, because the reality is the success and the ways that I got to success in corporate America is not exactly and not equivalent to the way you were successful as an entrepreneur. So it's like a constant reinventing of myself, but not losing myself, right? Like at the end of the day, I have very strong core values. I know what I stand for in the world. And so that helps me continue to be uniquely me and flexible at the same time.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Because I mean, it's like, I had another guest on the show, not a Podmax guest, but he said that it's like hard enough being yourself. Like, why would you try to like keep being somebody else? And it's exhausting trying to like, you know, put on a persona that's not actually like the real authentic you, you know? So like trying to do that every day, especially like in a world that you're in, I would imagine it would just get super exhausting. And I feel that sometimes because I'm in an industry that's very old school and there's a lot of people that have been doing it for a really long time. And, you know, like they're mentors of mine and I've learned so much from them. But at the same time, like I just have to do it like a little bit differently because I'm me and they're not, you know, and they're going to do it different than anybody else because they're them and I'm not, you know. So I think that is right on. All right. So we tickled the Trailblazer side of it. So now we're actually going to dive into it. So let's take it from like the first few sentences of that Trailblazer part is kind of like your start, like your upbringing. So talk to us about that and kind of how that initially shaped you. And then we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper as we go.
Yeah, what I'll share about my childhood is it was very humble. You know, I grew up in Clinton, Utah, for anybody who may or may not know where that is. And my mother is a Brazilian. She met my father. He was in the Air Force and he passed away when we were babies, or when I was a baby. So from a very young age, I had a lot of very strong-willed women in my life, including my mother and my two older sisters. And so really what I would say around that Trailblazer idea is my mom is the only person in her entire family to have left the same city and town that she grew up in. And, you know, my mom has, you know, for those of you who are familiar with Brazil, her entire family lives in the favelas, which is the, you know, the toughest neighborhoods, the most poorest communities. And she always had this vision that she would get out and do something different. And so my mom actually imprinted that in me as a child. And when I went away to college, I went to undergrad at Purdue. I remember thinking, right, like whatever I do, I want to be the first, or I want to be out in front, or I want to be able to show others that may look like me or sound like me or have the same goals and aspirations that it's possible to do whatever you put your mind to. And so, of course, in that realm, I actually had no clue I was going to go into the investment industry. I was going to be a veterinarian. Like I was like, I'm going to be the world's first veterinarian that, you know, heals all the animals in the world. And yeah, I went to college and just had a little too much fun, candidly, and didn't end up going to vet school.
Right. Well,
And so,
yeah, sorry.
yeah. And so for the longest time, as I shared, I remember being in meetings. I remember, right, because JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, very large companies, right? There wasn't just me in my role. Sometimes there were 100 of us, or sometimes there was 50. And I always remember being the only one in the room, right? Like just always. I was either always one of maybe 10 women, and I definitely was always the only woman of color. And so this idea of Trailblazer is is honestly the best gift that I could have received one day. Is another woman came up to me and said, I'm staying in this industry because I see you where you're at, right? I see that it's possible. And I just, right, for the longest time, that's what kept me in corporate America, was knowing that other women could identify with who I was. And so it was possible for them too.
Right. And at any point, did you like, because I feel like you kind of knew what was going on, that you were kind of like putting on like this persona to fit into that environment. But was that ever difficult for you, knowing that like people were looking up to you because you were a trailblazer, but also you were trying to fit into a mold that wasn't necessarily you? Was that like a internal struggle that you had, that you knew that you were, people were looking at you and you were doing it maybe not your way at the very beginning?
Yeah, it was like the I would say it was like in the closet in a way, right? So we'd go to the women's networking groups, or I'd speak to a panel of women, and I'd be 100% AJ. I'd be authentic about the challenges and the struggles I'd have. But yet in the boardroom, of course, I was as, intense as all the men around me, because in a way that's how I had to be. And so for a really long time, I used to give advice to women that I wouldn't follow myself. And then when I finally said, AJ, right, one of your core values is integrity.
Yeah.
How could you be telling women to do something you wouldn't do yourself? And so I started practicing, right? And it wasn't perfect in the beginning. There were times when I was sitting in meetings and I wanted to speak up, and I would, and what I wanted to say didn't come out the way I wanted it to. And I would, right in the corner, just be like, damn it, AJ, why'd you do that? But over time,
Yeah.
right, I got really clear on what my voice sounded like and when it made sense for me to speak up and what mattered. Because it's just so important right now more than ever, right? Like everything's changing, especially with the dynamics of COVID and our leadership, right? It's just so important that everyone, whether you're male or female, that you get really clear on what your voice is and you make it heard.
Right. So one of the other things that says on here is that your mom taught you the power of vision. So talk to me about like what vision is. Is that similar to goals, or is that separate?
I would say separate. It's vision is something that you can't see, but is true. So I always knew in some capacity that I was going to make it. And I don't know at the time I didn't really know what made it meant, but I just knew that, right, I wasn't going back to Utah, that I was going to be successful in whatever that I wanted to be successful in. And so this idea of vision is really like looking to the future and remembering who you want to be, versus a goal is looking at like 5 years down the road, I need to take these steps to get there. So a vision really isn't as clear as your goals, but it's something that you hold to work towards, so that you're constantly being in a space of creativity and possibility, which, we all have goals. I have them still too, but it's just very different than vision, because there's just no way my mom would have ever imagined that her life would have ended up the way it did, in the sense of, right, her moving to America, right, becoming a widow at 37, 38 years old, and then having, right, not only now she's got two grandchildren, she's got a great granddaughter, but it's just this idea that you've got this internal way of knowing is
Yeah.
the best way I would put it.
Did you ever feel any pressure, like coming from that background, and like your mom, coming from where she came from? And, I know you have two sisters, like you said, and all that, but was there ever like a pressure, like you needed to kind of, make that jump? Or was that just something that like, she just was a confident woman or whatever it was? I don't know. But was there pressure on you?
Oh, for sure. There was pressure when I was a young girl to get married, right? Find the right man. Even though my mom wanted me to be independent, she didn't want me to be alone
Right.
ultimately, because that's her truth. Her truth is that she's been widowed since she was 38. And so, I fell in line. I married a man. He's fantastic. We actually are still in contact. We're divorced, of course, now, but I did make those mistakes. I've tried to fill the gap or fill the void that my mom wanted me to. I got married entirely too young. And then right before I was 30, I woke up one day and just thought, this isn't the life I want to live. And so, it's common. And I would say for me, for sure, that there's been times in my life where I've just felt pressured to be or do or say things that aren't in alignment with who I am. And now, right, looking back, it was valuable lessons, because I realized every time I wasn't being true to myself, I was actually losing a really important part of myself. And that was creating resentment and frustration. So now that I'm able to like be in alignment with what I want to do and who I want to be in the world, yeah, there's tough days, right? There's some really tough days, but it's nothing like when I felt like I was living, right, multiple personalities.
Right. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to ask was that earlier, again, all over the place. Earlier, you mentioned that like the Wealth Conscious Coach started during COVID, right? So that started after COVID started. So that to me takes a lot of guts to start something like that and go out on your own and do your own thing when like there's a lot of confusion and stuff in the world. So to me, like when I was reading through, and I'll just say it, when I was reading through your bio, because like I mentioned before, I knew who Amber was because I've seen her at Podmaxes before. I did not know who you were because you've never been to a Podmax before. So I started doing some research, obviously, like a good show host would do. And I was like, wow, AJ is like actually a badass. And like, I didn't even know that you started this during COVID, which even makes you more of a badass. So now we're going to get into the Powerhouse side of it. So like, talk to me about that. Like, what was that like feeling like? Just, I mean, in the midst of all this confusion and chaos and, uncertainty and everything like that, just to like have the guts to go out on your own and do your own thing.
Well, I'll tell you for sure, Mike, there were definitely days of Netflix and, tater tots on the couch.
What was the early, like the couple early Netflix shows during that
Of
time?
course, Tiger King,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I had to get caught up on all of my series, which, are like, I think there's like a 12-year-old girl still trapped in me. I love those like those high school dramas. Like
Yeah.
they're so terrible. And I'm like, why am I watching this? But there's just something so sweet about it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
if I'm really telling on myself, right, I'm also a huge fan of like Lifetime movies. I know
Okay.
I whispered it,
Yeah.
but for,
Right.
but
Yeah.
for the most part,
Nobody's listening anyway, so it
go,
doesn't
okay,
matter.
good. No one's listening. But like, there was just days where I was like, oh, I'm good, right? I've got this corporate gig. It's all going smooth. Sure, there's other things I could be doing. And at the end of the day, I realized, again, going back to originally, like, what impact am I making? Like, ultimately, what matters to me and who do I want to be in the world? And because I've have this background in yoga, I've done a lot of personal work, as well as I've been in the presence of others having profound breakthroughs with, depression or weight gain or divorces or loss. And I realized there's just this deeper way to live life. And I was always skating right on that edge, right? I'd go to my yoga retreats and go to my yoga conferences and get really deep with people. And then I'd have to zone all the way back up to like 10,000 feet so that I didn't sound like a Martian in my meetings. And I finally was just like, I have more impact, I have more voice, and I have more joy if I'm actually living more in this deeper, more profound place with individuals and with people. And so I decided, right, I no longer can have, in a lot of ways, people are always like, AJ, when you look at us, it's like you're looking into our soul. And I was like, well, that's kind of where the Oprah came in, right? The Suze Orman meets Oprah. Someone called me that one day because they're like, you're so knowledgeable and you've got this business acumen. But then when we get on the couch, it's like we're talking to Oprah. And so, I was like, that's a gift, right? I have the gift to be able to be very strategic. And I also have a gift of being intuitive with individuals. And so that's the powerhouse in me, is this ability to hold both and to help people really balance which side is out of balance. So whether it's, right, someone who is too intense and they need to bring a little lightness and balance into their life, or someone who's a little too loosey goosey and needs a little more rigor and structure, that's what my gift is I'm able to help people see and move through what it is that's stopping them and being in their full potential and possibility.
Right. Because I think and I find it really interesting because when I was doing this research, I think I had like an idea in my head of like what you were going to be like. And to be honest, I thought it was going to be like the fake AJ, like the one that was like in the boardrooms and being like, the man, I guess. Right. So that's what I honestly, to be honest, that's what I thought I was going to get. But I just think that it's so cool that you're able to take this lean into who you are, right? And like take what would a lot of people in just a common state would think would be like less, not a powerhouse, right? Like more of like a lovey-dovey, whatever, like tags you want to slap onto a yogi. But I love just the idea that you're able to kind of take that, and because you're able to just lean into it so hard and be totally you, that makes you a powerhouse. And I totally agree with that because you're channeling all of your energy into one thing. I don't know if you
Yeah, I
wanted
would
to.
say
Yeah, go ahead.
energy is just it's so powerful, right? And I that's the good stuff, Mike. And I see it in you too, right? Your ability to bring out the best in people through these interviews is a gift not only to that individual, but to the people who listen, because it really is a special gift for people to want to come out of hiding, right? Like COVID shut us in, but we've actually been shut in for a really long time.
Yeah.
Right? We've been running around, going through the motions a little, right? A little bit in the drift, as I like to call it. And a lot of people now, which I'm grateful for, are starting to say, actually, stop, wait. There's a whole other way that I could be showing up and present with not only at work, but with your family and your loved ones. Because we always talk about in yoga, right? The way you show up in one place is how you show up everywhere. And so for me, right, I was showing up at work a certain way, and then I was showing up at home a certain way. And it was always all business. And I was losing connection with my family members. I was losing connection with myself. And now, like, I just have so much fun. I have a wonderful partner and 3 stepsons. And yeah, there's just no hiding with them, right? Like they know when I'm all business, and they let me know. They're like, you're not our manager over our chores, right? Like
Right.
you can't delegate these chores, your name's on them. So it's a lot of fun, and I've just been able to find more joy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like I think that while 2020 as a whole was kind of like a trash year, it did force people like you, like me, like a lot of people, like you were saying, to like that was like the first time I ever had I felt like I had a chance to actually like slow things down a little bit and just be like, look at myself. And it was like, I'm sure for a lot of people at the very beginning it was like, ugh, like I don't like this. And but then like, I started this during 2020, and this has been more me than I like maybe ever been. And I think that that's really just a cool way to kind of put it into focus, is that like it forced you to have some introspection, look at yourself, and kind of go from there. So I think that that's great. So keeping on the powerhouse topic, right? So part of being that powerhouse is that you're serving it as an inspiration for women in the finance world and all that kind of stuff. So talk to me about like how you do that. Is it just like the numbers thing, or is there like a deeper mindset that you try to help these people get to?
Yeah, so good. Yeah, is mindset is everything, right? Ultimately, what we're talking about, whether it's your burnout or your, you have an aspiration to do something else like entrepreneurship, or even a better relationship with your partner, money's one of those things that mindset matters. And so every time we work with women, we start right there, right? We start with, what do you believe is true about your relationship to money and wealth? And what I share with individuals is money is a very, we've been taught to create it or to treat it like a very boring friend that like sits in the back and has no personality and just is what it is.
Right.
And the reality is actually money is a very eccentric personality, because with multiple personalities too.
Yes.
Right? Because we all have such a different understanding, a different value, a different history with how we were either taught or not taught to deal with money. And so by getting women in touch with, okay, here's what is, like, this is the truth that I've created about money and wealth, is the most powerful thing we can do, because then from there they can shift. It's like when I was in the financial advising industry, I had a lot of advisors who would lead with, well, the performance of your portfolio is XYZ. And then, of course, their clients would leave them because they were outperformed or underperformed. versus the individuals who really got clear on what do you care about, what matters, what's your vision. Like those are the more emotional and qualitative traits that money possesses. And when you go there first and then talk about the more boring quantitative things, it's so much more profound and it's so much more personal in the sense that your money actually starts working for you rather than you working for your money. And I would say personally, when I finally got that, right after I got divorced, I had like $1,000 to my name because I was so busy keeping up with the Jones and trying to live this image. When I finally got that, okay, actually, I need to, right? I'm in the financial advising industry, but yeah, I can't even keep my own damn finances. Like I was like,
Yeah.
wow, right? Again, another place where I wasn't in integrity. And so when I got really, really clear on the fact that here's what money means to me and here's what wealth would look like, I realized that wealth had absolutely nothing to do with money for me. Right? It had to do with spending time with people I cared about. It had to do with traveling to places I'd always wanted to see. And when I started introducing those things versus focusing on the money, everything shifted for me. Absolutely everything.
Awesome. Do you get more of a rush helping other people reach where you reached, or did you get more of a rush when you finally figured it out for yourself?
Oh, that's a good question.
We only ask hard-hitting questions
Yeah,
on this show.
I would say the last value I haven't shared is generosity. And
Mhm.
so I would absolutely say I get more excitement with helping others. And it's a double-edged sword because I often don't take care of myself and I focus too much on others, which I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to that.
Yep.
Because I am so motivated by seeing others reach their personal bests. Like the question I am out in the world to answer is what is possible when you unbind money and potential? Because that really is the question I'm after. I really enjoy seeing when a woman or a man or anyone I've worked with have that shift and realizing whatever they thought was holding them back or keeping them down, like, oh, actually, no, that's not it. Like, I have the power. It's all within me to move forward. So I love it. And I do tend to burn the candle at both ends. But at the end of the day, I want to, right? I want to be the woman who, like, has a legacy beyond when I'm like actually physically no longer here. Right.
Right.
Like the reason why I called it my wealth conscious coach versus AJ Bishop's, coaching is because I want to look back one day and say, I created that and someone else is now running it and all these women have been impacted. Right. My vision is that in 10 years, 1 million women will have had transformation. And I know I can't do that by myself. So that's why I'm investing in others every single day to become the ambassadors of this movement in a way.
Right. So you mentioned men too. So it's not just women that you help. It's like you help anybody. Anybody that's looking for help, you will help them. Or is there a focus on women because
Yeah,
that's what
there's
you?
definitely a focus on women. However, the men sometimes could get involved if the wife or the spouse or the partner wants to bring in. But I would say primarily my joy, my love is with women, and that's
Right.
my sweet spot. I do have some clients that are men though.
Gotcha. All right. I just wanted to just clarify just because I heard, say that. But I mean, I knew that the primary message was to women. So can you share like any like specifics, because you're talking about how people sometimes have like these, thoughts or preconceived notions or misconceptions about how like, they're not able to actually like achieve make their fantasies a reality, right? So like, are there some common themes that you see amongst people that maybe like some of our listeners might relate to and be able to kind of like help them at least maybe kind of get off the schneid, so to speak?
Yeah, I would say the most common is wealth is worth. And that's about being enough, right? It's about knowing that you are smart enough, knowing that you, right, deserve everything that you possibly want, right? A lot of people think that those words are Pollyanna. And the reality is anything that any of us want, we can achieve. It's just our mindset that is constantly pushing us back into what was, right? It's what keeps us safe. It's what keeps us as is. right? I would guess, Mike, like when you started thinking about doing this podcast, there was a part of you that's like, that's a stupid idea, right? Or who's going to listen? Or
Yeah.
even,
Right.
and then you have this shift where it's like, well, actually, I don't care if anyone listens, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm going to do this for myself. And most of the time when that happens, it actually has a profound effect on people, right? Whenever you're truly giving from a place of just sure, like just pure, like giving versus what's in it for me, there's a profound way of determining your worth. And so the fact that, right, when people come from a place of I am not enough, it's more of a scarcity based. And we've all been in experience of that, whether that's with ourselves or with people we know, right? Like I call it like the used car salesman feel, where it's just like you can tell someone's trying to get something from you.
Oh yeah.
Versus if you're coming from a place of I'm enough, you're enough, and together, like we're enough, it really brings out a whole new place of possibility
Yeah.
because you're not stuck in this like, oh, I've got to fix it or I've got to change that or you're better than me. I don't deserve to be in the same room or, all of that icky stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I find it so interesting too, because like you were saying, like when I first started, I had the idea of doing the show. And originally this show was not this format. It was like 5 minute spot, LinkedIn video only, 3 questions, very scripted. But I just had the idea. I called the morning spotlight because in the morning we would spotlight somebody. And once I knew that I knew when I had something, when I was going to ask 10 people, like 10 of my closest networking colleagues to do it with me. So that would give me the first 2 weeks of content. All 10 said yes. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I could actually this could actually work. And, over time, it just kind of started to build. And I realized that it's not, I just like this because I have people on like you, like everybody that I've had today at PodMax, everybody that I've had I've recorded, I don't know how many episodes. But everybody that's on here, like I learned something from, whether it's like a technical thing or just like a mindset thing. And it's just so cool to talk to all these cool people like yourself and kind of just like grow myself. So it's not about me. It's about, you guys and then what the audience can also gain from what you guys bring to the table.
Well, what you're speaking to, Mike, is my favorite thing about the reality that we are we're way more alike than we are different. And there's too many messages, there's too many people out there trying to separate the fact that, right, we are different. And the reality is actually we're all so similar. And when we really listen to people, you can see yourself in them. And that is why we do a lot of our work in group. So most people are like, why would I want to talk about my money in front of others? But it's actually very healing.
Yeah.
And it creates these bonds with these women, right? Like all these strangers coming together, right? Everyone's like, well, am I going to be comfortable? And yeah, that happens in the beginning. But after a week or two, right? Like when you really just have the opportunity to look and say, this person is just like me, there's just magic that happens.
Yeah. And like that's what I think. Like sometimes I have a big problem with like those self-help coaches that they have like one blanket message and then they're trying to appeal to a large group of people. And I think that there's like a big disconnect between the people that go seek help from them and it like the message resonates with them, which is awesome and it helps them. But at the same time, I think that the people that it helps don't realize that this is like a larger message that is a larger message because they're trying to, monetize it to a certain degree. And like that's supposed to connect with a lot of people. So even though you have that mindset that you're not enough or you have all these faults or nobody's going to listen to or you have a weird voice or you talk with your hands a lot like me, like there's plenty of people that are exactly like you. And that's why that message is the way that it is. So and like we got the message up on the top of the screen a little bit ago, which I'm upset about because we could probably keep going for another hour, I feel like, but we're getting close to the end of this episode. So I do want to have a chance to get into our closing segment, which we call Under the Spotlight. So the Spotlighters, which is what I call the Spotlight audience, have listened to Mike Hamm and AJ Bishop talk for, 45 minutes so far, maybe more. What is the one thing you want them to walk away from this episode with?
I think the one thing that I'm just actually coming to for myself for the first time is the power of community and connection, right? Like the fact that had we not had this similar interest in having a voice and having a message and spreading it for the positive, we wouldn't have met. Like, we just wouldn't have.
Nope.
And there's so many people in the world who want to support what you're up to. So find your people, connect with them, and collaborate, because that is actually the future, in my opinion. The future is no longer the lone wolfing, is no longer, right, just doing it on your own. We're so much more powerful together than we are separate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's such a true statement for sure. Because I mean, you look at just you coming on my show, like you said, I mean, we're on literally opposite ends of the country. You're in San Diego, I'm in Jersey. Like we have different backgrounds, different, everything's different, but we get on here and the messages and the stuff that we believe in and the stuff that we're like passionate about has a lot of parallels. I mean, like, I'm not a yoga guy. I mean, I can't even touch my toes, but I get the mindset thing. I get all that. So, all right. So that is going to wrap up our show. I want to thank everybody for listening. We are going to make sure. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to ask. AJ, where can people get more AJ Bishop?
Yeah, the best place to find me is mywealthconsciouscoach.com. We're in the middle of creating a brand new website, so it should be up and running here. March 1 is actually our deadline, so I'm really excited about that.
Awesome.
And we're also on Instagram, so mywealthconsciouscoach.com.
Cool. All right. I will make sure I link all those things in the show notes at the end of this. So for everybody listening, also, I will put my contact information, just like always, in the show notes, themorningspotlight.com, or you can email me at themorningspotlight@gmail.com if you want to get in touch with the show. AJ, again, thank you so much for coming on. This was an amazing way to cap off my third PodMax event and your first PodMax event. I hope I was able to live up to the expectations.
Man, you were the best. I
was the
excited.
Best.
Yeah, you were the best.
I'm going back into the big room. I'm telling everybody that I was the best.
You better. No, I'm so grateful that you had me, and appreciative for the time.
Of course. Absolutely. Anytime. And everybody else, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.